Us today for this wonderful committee meeting. This meeting will be conducted virtually using Microsoft Teams. Committee members are expected to join the meeting via the provided Teams link and follow standard meeting protocols, including muting mics when not speaking and keeping cameras on while speaking if your bandwidth allows. And any action we take will be taken by roll call vote. Members of the public may observe this meeting through designated Teams links, and they participate during the scheduled public comment period. For technical issues, please check your settings, reconnect, or notify the organizer for assistance. This meeting will be recorded for official record keeping and public transparency. By joining, participants acknowledge that audio, video, and shared content may be captured. Now, for the roll call. Billy, can you conduct the roll call?
Sure thing. Jim Chang.
Here.
Cliff Lee.
Here.
Nancy Agee. John Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have quorum.
We have quorum. Awesome. At this time, we would like to open the floor for comments from the public. Billy, can you please recognize any members of the public who would like to make public comments?
Yeah, at this time, if anybody from the public would like to make a public comment, please take yourself off mute. All right.
Okay.
I don't see that we have any.
All right. Having seen none, Billy, do we have any written comments that were submitted ahead of the meeting?
We do not.
Well, with that, then we'll close the public comment period and move on to the consent agenda. And in your committee packets, you'll find two items in our consent agenda. One, the meeting minutes from October 15th, 2024. Yes, 2024. The 2024 meeting of the committee and committee charter, and also the committee charter, which describes the responsibility of the PPE committee. These responsibilities align with those stated in the board bylaws. At minimum, the Program Performance and Evaluation Committee is tasked to ensure that projects approved by the gova Virginia board are meeting the board established criteria and are consistent with the gova Virginia mission by conducting a semi-annual review of the funded projects, and two, assessing program performance, ensuring contract compliance of projects, and three, identifying scalable projects. We are going to vote on the consent agenda items in front of us as a block. So at this time, is there a member who would like to remove any items from the block vote? Having seen none, is there a motion to approve the item before us as recommended? Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All right. Any further discussion? If not, then Billy, please conduct the roll call.
Jim Chang.
Aye.
Cliff Lee.
Aye.
Nancy Agee. John Peterson.
Aye.
Mr. Chair, both the consent agenda passed.
All right. Moving on. Next up on our agenda is the FY26 Q2 project review. Enclosed in your packet, you'll see the memo describing the list of projects closed during this past quarter, that's October through December of 2025, followed by the performance closeout report separated by implementation projects that were approved by the gova Virginia State Board, and also planning projects that were administratively approved by dhcd. This past quarter, there were a total of 18 projects that completed a performance closeout. I think someone has their mic on. There we go. What did I just say?
Thank you.
Oh, okay. This, I think I just said this, but this past quarter, there were a total of 18 projects that completed a performance closeout. The table shown in the introductory memo summarizes the aggregate outcomes achieved for these projects. Further details on the individual project performance closeout reports are enclosed in the committee packet. Okay, Sarah,
Thank you. Yes.
can you describe the
Yes.
full life cycle of a Go Virginia grant award and how these performance closeout narratives are developed and used? It'll
Okay.
provide some context.
Absolutely. I just
related-
want to provide
There we
a little context. Thank you so much for that introduction,
Yeah.
Jim. Can you guys see my screen? Can you see the slides? Okay, I don't want to overwhelm you with the slides, but I do want to cover a little bit of the context for this. So for folks that have been on this committee, and for folks who may be new and for the public observing today, I just want to speak briefly to the life cycle of a Go Virginia grant. And this is really beginning with some very important decisions of the board, some made by this committee. And the first one is really defining the core performance outcomes for each of the 4 investment priorities. This program has established core performance outcomes. Those are quantifiable measures of activity. We track those during the grant performance period. At time of application, the applicant identifies and describes those activities and outcomes. They use an outcome template that's provided, and they must describe the mechanism they're going to use to track the outcomes. The contract or the grant agreement further describes those committed outcomes, any activities that are funded with the grant resources, and any products as applicable that will result from the grant project itself. And that contract is a 3-party agreement between DHCD, the regional council, and the subgrantee, and that is the applicant. That is the entity that's actually going to be implementing that project. So again, just to provide some context. When that project starts, DHCD creates in its grant management system a series of reports. There is reporting throughout the life cycle of the grant quarterly. We are responsible for also monitoring transactions that occur with Go Virginia funds and further progress towards goals. And we're always going back to that grant agreement as a point of reference. What you're seeing today is something you may have seen for the first time, but it's been in place since 2022, and it's something called the project closeout report. So when we close a project, it's a 2-part process, okay? The first step is a fiscal closeout, and that's when we are doing our due diligence to make sure that these resources are deployed in a manner consistent with the grant agreement on activities and products, services related to the provision of the delivery of the project. So that fiscal closeout, that has to be accomplished within 30 days after the grant closeout date. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds here, but again, I want to give you some context. That's an accounting for the resource. The next step I think is even more important, and that's the performance closeout. This was designed a couple of years ago, and the purpose of this report is to allow the regional council and that subgrantee or implementer to describe how the project achieved its outcomes, lessons learned, most importantly, how it supported the region in the execution of its growth and diversification plan. The narratives that you see, I apologize, we're going to be improving on their formatting, but they also ask another important question, which is what's next? And that's true whether the project is an implementation project. It says, how will this effort be sustained? Where is this experiment leading you, for example? And for the planning grants, it's asking the applicant to speak to what is your strategy to implement this plan or to scale this pilot if it's proved to be a viable solution, right, to one or more opportunities or challenges presented in that growth and diversification plan. So I want to pause right there and see if any committee members have questions about our process and this performance closeout, again, just to contextualize it, this is the final attestation. You can see they're all signed. I'm sorry, somebody's not on mute again. I can't see him. Can you, Billy? It may not. I'm not saying it's you, Cliff. But again, I want to provide this performance closeout in context of our total grant kind of monitoring process.
Hi, this is John Peterson. I have a question. So in that closeout, one would think or hope that everything went as scheduled, so that if we come across another opportunity that's very similar, can we ask them to say, you know, what would you might have done differently during the process, just so that we can, there's some good takeaways. Because, you know, we all think we have a plan and that goes out for a certain period of time, and most of the times it doesn't go exactly as we had planned. And so I think there's, we always do internally, okay, lessons learned, what would we have done differently project to maybe get a better result, a different result, whatever. But I think that's almost more important as anything else.
Yes. That's a great suggestion, John. And when Jim and I were preparing for this meeting the other day, I thought, are these the right questions? Are they going to provide information for the state board or other regions? I think the question of what would we have done differently, or what advice would you give to someone who is pursuing a similar initiative, would be a great addition to this report. Cliff, I know you've gone off screen, but I want to make sure we capture any of your thoughts or observations as well.
Oh, I'm sorry. You were yelling at me and I hit my video button as opposed to my audio button. So I'm here.
It's okay. It's okay.
I'm just trying to be quiet because I got admonished. No.
I wasn't sure if it was you, Cliff. I was assuming it was a member of the public. It's
It
easy enough
wasn't
to
actually
leave.
me. It
Okay.
yeah. I'm sitting here not doing a thing. No, I don't have any additional
Okay.
thoughts, but thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, we do something similar for planning grants. The process, of course, is a little different. We ask them to provide that performance narrative. Important thing is certification by the regional council that those results that they're reporting were actually achieved. And then just providing a little bit of a potential roadmap on how they may implement a project. And then we can collect a variety of attachments, reports. We do collect all of the planning grant reports, et cetera.
Yeah, maybe actually, Sarah, I do have a question. So
Yeah.
when and it goes back to how we evaluate, when we think about we're going to invest $100,000, I'm making up a number. It's just a nice round number. How do we think about getting a return on that investment in the very beginning? How do we evaluate that?
Yeah.
And what kind of risk factor do we put on that? Because, you know, I sit on private equity boards where you think about those things a lot. You obviously have a pretty high risk factor because you know your returns are, you know, going to be hopefully very good.
Yes.
But how do we think about that, and then how does that play into the evaluation on the backside of, you know, that how quickly do we want to get our money back, and how much risk do we want to put on that we're going to get our money back?
That's a really good segue or transition, Cliff, because we're going to talk at some length about return on investment.
Okay.
But to answer your immediate question regarding the performance closeout, so we do ask applicants to speak to the economic impact of their effort. And there are two statutory references to economic impact, which says projects should be evaluated based on their economic impact.
Right.
And we're currently using a return on investment template, which is a very crude instrument. It really measures the fiscal return to the Commonwealth. It makes some assumptions about how an industry will expand by measure of employment, the number of jobs, and the wages paid for that particular industry, for example. We measure that at time of application at 3 and 5 year intervals. But we currently do not run that calc again at project close to compare, for example, the initial expectations of the project versus what was actually achieved. Now, I want to be a little bit cautious because obviously many of these app grants or projects are really designed to build system capacity that
Right.
are continue to produce results over time. So I'm going to be able to speak to some alternatives and some other tools we've been developing that are probably a little more nuanced, using break-even analysis so we don't get bound by 3 and 5 years, for example. But I think it's a really good discussion, and it's related to another item in the agenda.
Okay, great. Sorry to get ahead or get us off track, whichever way.
No,
whichever
not
way
at
it
all.
is.
You're tying it all together. So I think it's a fantastic question. But to answer your question, no, we asked them, what did you commit to produce in terms of outputs? What did you actually produce in terms of outputs? And we're obviously tracking how they utilize the cash, the financial resources over time. And then we monitor throughout the grant, are the activities occurring? So did the project, deliver the activities and again, the outputs just as they were committed? That's the comparison we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Sarah, additional question is, we're sending dollars to them over time. Are we sending it to them after it's been spent, prior to it's been spent? Are we sending them a little bit more than, so they're asking, saying that, okay, we're going to spend it over the next 6 months? And that leads the question as to, let's just say there's excess funds. Are we getting into the weeds and finding out what they're doing with that? Are they putting it into local community banks, or what are they doing with it until such time as it really is dispersed to their contracts or whatever?
That's an excellent question, John. This is a reimbursement-based grant. So they actually have to provide us with an invoice and proof that they paid it. And then we reimburse them for that expense. That's a simple example. Some of the transactions are different, but we are not using your
There's no
example.
excess. Yeah.
Now, if the project closes at the end of the contract period and there's a residual fund balance, meaning they didn't use all those resources, it goes back to the original source. So it goes back to their own regional per capita fund or the competitive fund to be deployed at a later date.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Good question. So this is the first time we've shared the performance closeout narratives. This committee and its charter, I think, makes this a perfect venue to share this information. We provided on the memo just a summary or kind of a in aggregate results. Do you have any ideas about how this committee, during John's report or Jim's reports, for example, might speak to the projects that were closed during the most recent quarter? Do you think it's important?
Without it, it's, you got to bring it to a conclusion, I think.
Okay.
It's one of the more important things. Okay, hearing, okay, how did it succeed? Because we see it in it before its infancy, and then I guess it's gratifying or to see, what is our return on the investment? Because without kind of seeing those results, it's kind of like, okay, what really happened? It's kind of just stressful. So I think that's.
Yeah, I'm sorry, John, I interrupted you. I think we're 10 years into Go Virginia now, and I think we've gotten a number of great projects, and we've obviously got some pretty big wins out of Go Virginia. GoTech and the biotech space and et cetera, I think have all been, fabulous successes. And I think we've probably got enough projects and data where we can look at and say, okay, what are the things that really make projects successsul?
Yes.
What does that mean for how we need to think about evaluating the next round of projects? What are the areas that have had the biggest impact in terms of advancing economic growth in the state? And then, not to put a negative spin on it, but what are the areas that, are probably not the best areas for us to focus on because we haven't seen the return? Because we've now have enough time where we have seen seeds planted actually begin to grow. beyond those kind of 3 to 5 year windows. And I think it'd be very helpful for us to use that then to inform not only the projects we approve, but even potentially start to give direction to the regions about, look, these are the areas that we think are going to make the most impact over the next 10-year cycle of Go Virginia.
Yeah.
So,
And on that note, I'd just like to introduce James Clemens. James is a grant analyst here within the division, and James is smiling inside. He may be smiling outside because Cliff, we've been starting to walk down this path, really looking for kind of the magic combination. He's been doing quite a bit of analysis for our internal review by investment category, for example. And he, in
Right.
fact, working with Shara Gibson, were critical in helping us build our performance dashboard. So we've got some capabilities now, and in fact are doing that internally. So that's great
Yeah.
to hear that this is something the committee would like us to further.
I think it's probably the most strategic question we can ask in terms of, because then what does that mean for how we think about the grants over the next 3 to 5 year period? Because if we know that this combination of elements is what leads to success, then we can actually start to steer the regions to submit those kinds of things that obviously tie the regions together. And then bluntly, we won't leave money on the table, which has happened the
Yes.
past few years. And then the General Assembly has to call it back. I mean, I'm calling legislators right now to try and keep the money we got. And if we had better, I think, criteria, we would actually be putting the money to use, because we do have some great wins. And so how do we have more wins?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you for that. We are going to reviewing our closeout process as we do, and the performance closeout. John, I agree with you. I think it maybe is the most important moment, more important than the application review and the award itself. Everybody gets really excited, but to me, this is where, the test is proven. So we'll continue to look at these reports to refine them, to make sure we're asking the important questions, and so that we can use the information here, not just the quantifiable data, which I think is very important, and we could certainly put into an ROI calculator. But I think the narrative provides us with some insight and ideas around what are the ingredients, Cliff, right? What are the critical success factors, and how can we drive more resources towards projects that have those kind of characteristics?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and without, let's just say 10 years, that gives you enough data points to see trends.
Yes.
And without, because you only know it through experiences. So I think after 10 years, we've got enough to kind of to give us really good insight as to, what worked and what didn't.
Yeah. Yep. So, Jim, I just, want you to know, James has already started looking at performance by investment strategy. That may be something that we could bring to a future meeting. And, we'd love to continue to consult with this committee on strategies. And I love, Cliff and John and Jim, you all have your own experiences using this type of information for strategic decision making. So we really value your thoughts on this.
Yeah, great feedback from the members. Much appreciated. If we're ready, we can move on because these are all interrelated.
They are.
Yep, Sarah's going to give us a little reminder of what we've done with the JLARC study. Like Sarah said earlier, from 2023, and we've gotten through some of them. And on 4, Sarah's going to update on at least refresh our memories on those things, and also what remains to be done on JLARC report item 5.
Yes. So Cliff may be familiar, John perhaps less so. The Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee is a legislative body. It's a committee, and they periodically call for studies. They have an absolutely great staff, folks that do review on a variety of government programs across every agency, I would say, in the Commonwealth. So everything from Health and Human Services to the Department of Education to Go Virginia. So a number of years ago, there was a call, because we are on cycle. There typically is an evaluation of programs every 5 to 7 years to review the Go Virginia program. And that was delivered 2 years ago this past December, which seems like forever ago. Now, if you are lucky enough to get audited by JLARC, it's really an opportunity, in my opinion. Now, kudos to my staff who spent the whole year prior to that feeding them information and answering questions. But the report included 16 recommendations and a number of policy recommendations. And we distributed those across the working committees here so that there could at least be a process for review. It is not necessary for the state board to react to every recommendation. I want to make that clear, but I do think it's important that they be discussed. And that's what we're going to do today. So there were 3 recommendations, just as a reminder, which this committee has already reviewed. This one was related to definitions. This project or recommendation was addressed in March of 24. Basically adopted the recommendations in the proposal, and we also redefined jobs filled as job placements. That was a definition that was consistent with Virginia Works, which is another state agency that also looks at jobs filled or job placement. So that is complete. The next one also spoke to a revision of the core grant outcomes. And that project as well is complete. So in March of 2024, the members of this committee reviewed and approved staff changes to the Go Virginia core grant outcomes and their associated definitions for clarity. And that has been completed. The next one recommended that the board should amend Go Virginia's bylaws to assign responsibility for the review of outcome calculation methods and data verification to staff. This was addressed in August 19th of 2024. We discussed the review process. Okay, we discussed the roles of the regional councils and the roles of staff here at the state. And it was the decision by consensus that no action needed to be taken on this recommendation. Which brings us to today. I can't share this enough. This is a 6-step process from beginning to end on how we, the discipline I think we apply to not just tracking outcomes, but really defining them thoughtfully and verifying them all the way through that performance closeout. Quarterly reporting is required. I don't want to go into too much detail here, but those reports have to be approved by my staff, which means if they're not complete, someone's making a phone call. And if that performance closeout isn't signed by the appropriate individuals, which again is just an attestation of a certification, if you will, of results, we're going to follow up with that regional council. This is just a little bit about the procedures and the data validation that we're already completing. Which brings us to item 5. If I may move on to item 5, Jim.
Please do.
Okay. So there's 2 recommendations JLARC's made, which we have not addressed. The first of which you'll find here. The Go Virginia board should develop and implement a policy to assess the long-term impact of individual projects and the Go Virginia program as a whole, including which information should be collected. This committee was referenced specifically in the JLARC study. This committee was created just before the study was issued. Currently, there is limited collection and evaluation of outcomes beyond the 2-year grant period. Just want to remind you, once the resources are expended and we get that performance closeout, we do not require grant recipients to provide us with any other tracking over time. JLARC also asserted that code vests the board with the power and duty to assess the program's longer-term impact, and recognizes that, and this is intentional, many Go Virginia projects remain active after the grant period, and there might be some value in reaching out to them and seeing if that work has continued and how it's evolved. So, where are we on that? I want to speak just briefly to project tracking after project close. And at this time, staff would recommend that we do engage a third party to evaluate a sample of the more than 100 projects that have closed. Number one, to determine if the projects are being sustained, which I think one question of JLARC. But I think more importantly, how they continue to make an impact and how they've evolved. So we've prepared an RFP. We do have limited, but I think adequate administrative funds to move forward with a study of this type. I believe this study, if we got this kicked off, could be completed in time for the September board retreat, and might be a good point in time, just to reflect on the success of these projects. Now, I think about them, John, like an investment portfolio. I don't expect them all to be winners, but I think there are some really, really fantastic examples, demonstrations of success here. And I think the project review could lead us to some of the, more verifiably to some of those conclusions. So I open that up for discussion.
Yeah, within each of the projects, they talk about the staffing. How do we ever find out whether, I guess that's in the closeout report, that's one of the things is, was it properly staffed, right?
Yes.
Because if you're not finding the right people to help you get through the, so what process, how many of the successful projects had a successful staff that's included? Because, sometimes that's the same thing with like philanthropic organizations. If you've got the right people running it, they can get a lot better result.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it gets in there, is how do we evaluate the staff that are going to be included? Because knowing how qualified they are can give you a better indicator of how well the project will ultimately be.
Yeah. Typically, John, if there's an application and they're requesting funding to support staffing, we do ask them to describe the principals that'll be managing or directing the project. And oftentimes we'll get CVs or resumes that just help us understand what that individual's background and experience is. So, I do think that's one. Now, in some cases, they're proposing to hire an individual, and that is the choice of the grant recipient on how to make that selection. But I think in terms of evaluating the project, I do think the choice of staff is important for sustainability. And so that may be a topic that we could explore through this research project. I think that's a good thought.
Yeah. So Sarah, I love this idea, obviously given my question that I asked earlier. So thank you.
That was not
So
a plant, by the way.
No,
Cliff and I
it was great.
didn't, we didn't talk about this at all.
Yeah. Although I did see you yesterday, but we did not talk about this in full disclosure. So the first question though, how do we make sure we get, I don't know how big a sample you need to take, and you need to get some winners and the losers, and you got to get enough from enough sectors so that we can get the learnings,
Yes.
necessary to identify that. So the sample has to be big enough. The second is, how do you get the right criteria? Because the criteria may be similar to, but not the exact same as what you used, in that first year or two cycle. And then how do you find the right firm or
Yes.
person to do
Yes.
this. You know, because I think it would be incredibly valuable to have this for the session that you talked
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Um,
So I think that's something that I'd love your input on, and of course the team
Mhm.
as well. So I prepared a draft RFP.
okay.
If and when we bid this, we've got two paths. Just, full transparency, if we contract with another state agency, which would be any of our public universities, for example, often the times they have divisions within the systems that do
Right.
this type of research. We wouldn't have to publicly procure it. That would be the quickest, smoothest path to identify a team to do a project like this. I think it would really be up to this committee to take a look at. This is generally the question we want answered at the end. And I would want anyone interested in doing this type of work is to tell us how they would design the experiment, right? So that's what I would advise, but I'm
Mhm.
certainly open
No,
to,
I agree with that,
other
because an
ideas
expert's
and
going to have to tell
suggestions.
you, yeah, an expert's going to have to tell you how to design the work. Right.
Yeah, I mean, I know how I would do it but I think it's important that I don't do it, right? Or
Mhm.
any of my staff. I
No, it
think
needs
a
to be
third, yes,
an independent look.
yeah,
But what you're looking for at the end is, I'm making it up. It's these 5 criteria in these areas that lead you to the greatest success.
exactly. Yes, I think we would want, my first thought was we could just do a randomized sample. I think we need to make sure we've got projects in each of the investment areas. I think we need some
Yeah.
geographic distribution,
Yeah.
not just big projects,
Yeah.
medium projects, small projects. So that's why I would really like
No,
to
because you
speak
got to
with the,
create cells, just like
yeah,
you're building your market research study, to make sure you've
Eh,
got enough of each area. It can't be randomized
yeah,
in terms of how you do it. So,
yeah. I
sorry, we're
agree.
getting a little wonky for the committee here, but
I know.
yeah.
But I think what I'm hearing, and John, I want to make sure you and Jim are on the same page here. You guys would endorse or recommend we move forward with this particular strategy. And I think that, I'd love to, share the RFP with you and make sure that the way it's framed is gonna get us the types of proposals or responses to address this question.
Hey, Sarah, just procedurally,
Yeah.
we would recommend what? We would recommend going through the process, or we would make a recommendation to the board and the board votes on it, or what's the next procedure we would have to do?
Mm-hmm. So, this is a bit unprecedented. Early in Go Virginia's day, DHCD on behalf of the board did a number of studies. We engaged Techonomy to do some strategic
Right.
research around innovation.
Mhm.
So we hold a budget for this type of work already in we call it, our admin budget. It wouldn't take a grant award, for example. We've got
Ah.
some capacity this year in there. So I don't think it would require board action. I think DHCD could act, with board support, but you guys tell me what your comfort level is. This is something, Jim, that could come before the state board at the March meeting. We could run these other in parallel, but if you really wanted, and I think it's an important statement to make by the board, yes, we do want to talk about long-term project viability. We do want to
Yeah.
get a better understanding of what's been funded, and how it's worked. So
Yeah, my recommendation is that this committee endorse this work to the board and that the board endorse it. But if it doesn't require action on your part, we don't necessarily have to take a vote, but we can endorse it. And that you work in parallel and we're ready to go with the process at that point, because you're still going to have to build the RFP and
yes,
run your list of who you want to send it to and all that kind of stuff.
right.
So, yeah. Because it does make a statement. I think that's important, that we're thinking about the long-term impact of Go Virginia.
Okay.
I agree with that, for sure.
All right. The next topic is a bit more complicated, and we're not going to be able to cover it in detail today, but I want to give you guys some background. So JLARC recommendation number 12, really spoke to return on investment. And the recommendation stated that the board should revise its policies to clarify that only grant applications that would require a significant investment, and I believe Billy found reference to a number in the JLARC study, which the significant investment was $1 million, should include an estimated return on investment. Further, it suggested the return on investment should be tailored to each project and be calculated by experienced professionals using established methodologies, and the cost should be paid for by the Go Virginia program out of existing fund balances. Okay, just briefly. Now, I want to talk to you about return on investment, why and how it's used in evaluation and how it's calculated. Okay, because it's a little bit of a different model. The enabling legislation requires evaluation based on 10 different factors. And I've included references to the 2 that speak to economic impact. So return on investment in this context is just one facet, if you will, of economic impact as it's been used in Go Virginia. The first speaks to the economic impact or outcome of the activity with an emphasis on goals identified in the Regional Council's plan for economic growth and diversification. The second statutory reference speaks to another evaluation criteria, the expected economic impact and outcomes of the project and the complexity of the project relative to the size of the economy of the region, right? And that just means a Go Virginia project that may be small in scale in Southwest or South Side shouldn't be viewed less favorably than a project that's occurring at scale in Hampton Roads or Northern Virginia. I think that's the second point there. So we use a return on investment calculator that depends on 2 inputs, only 2, jobs created and how much those jobs pay. It is very simple. It assumes a level of job growth is going to occur in a targeted industry as a result of the project. And that's regardless of which investment category. So if it's a workforce training program, right, that's going to train 100 people, there's some assumptions made that 70 to 80 of those people are going to be placed in jobs within that industry. It could be higher than 70 or 80, but I'm just using that as an example. It is actually a fiscal return to the Commonwealth calculator. It is not an economic impact study. It doesn't consider other impacts as a result of the project. It estimates state revenue increases for income taxes and sales tax only. And when I say sales tax generated by the people that are earning the wages. And I've already mentioned the 2 inputs that are required. Okay.
Kind of question, does the measurement matter whether that job was created in the region that the grant was given to? Like, does it have to stay within the region to get, or if it stays there, does it get a higher return notation than if it went to a different region?
It's a good question, John. The answer is no. The wage that's attached to that job, okay, is regionally dependent. So there could be a job created in Northern Virginia that would pay less in Southwest Virginia, but that's just a cost of living differential. We assume the jobs created are going to happen in that region. If it's a joint application between 2 regions, we'll often see kind of the blended average of wages in the regions there.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. We measure it, our template, our calculator, it calculates fiscal return to the Commonwealth for 3 and 5 years. Those are the 2 choices you have. That template is completed by the regions. The regional council staff supports the applicant in putting the inputs. It's an Excel spreadsheet, and that's included in the application as an attachment. Okay. But I want to make sure everybody here understands it is a measure of economic impact, but one of several ways that the applicant can demonstrate or describe their projects making an impact. We give them an opportunity in the application structure to provide an overview of the project, describe the industry focus and how the project will support their growth and diversification plan. Section 3, I think, is really important. What are the products, deliverables, outcomes? By what measure is this investment going to expand their capacity to train a qualified workforce, for example, serve and support high potential startups, right? So the narrative, I think, becomes really important. The economic impact template is required for all projects currently. What you see there in italics is actually in the application. The template's used as an evaluation criterion, but a positive return in the 3 or 5 year impact study period is not an eligibility requirement. It does not have to be positive. It's a reference point. So does anybody on the committee have a question about this topic? Now, we have made some changes since the JLARC study was released. I do think that there was some, I don't want to call it a misunderstanding, or we may have created it that placed too much emphasis on a positive ROI using this little calculator as a criteria for funding, right? Meaning the ROI had to be positive at 3 or 5 years to be considered. And the state board has funded many projects that do not present that way using that fiscal return template.
Hey, Sarah, I think it'd be helpful to take a look at the JLARC comment again so we can make sure we answer it. Okay.
Yep. So these are the 2 questions of the 1 recommendation. The board should provide its policies to provide clarity that only grant applications that would require significant investments are required to do it at all. It's really a 2-part recommendation, so I've separated them. And the second, suggesting that if the ROI, the return on investment methodology should be tailored to each individual project and calculated by a third party. So it's a 2-part question. And I'd just like to see, what else we could do to help support the committee in evaluating this particular recommendation.
While John and Cliff are thinking about this, if I can just make my comment on the first
Please.
part, is that I think Virginia does a really good job of making sure that the investments into things like this, like Go Virginia, have a good, proper return, and that we're responsible for our citizens' money. And I think ROI is one of the things. I'm sorry, my phone just went off. Is one of those calculations. I'd like to know, and I think it's important that people go through that exercise, but I don't know how much of a burden it is for smaller things. Like you mentioned, if the cutoff is $1 million, that's pretty high. I mean, how many $1 million projects we do? Oh, there we are. There's the answer. What's the burden? What's the burden? If it's I still think that we need to know that there is a break even or something coming down the line, and that they do some thinking about how much money goes in and where the return really is.
Yes,
Here it
and James has done an analysis of our awards. These are for closed projects. So you can see the average award amount is about 545. And the median's 430, 50% of those awarded are below and above. Similarly, for statewide projects, as you would expect, they're larger. The median's about 2.3 million. the thing I'm challenged with, Jim, and I'd appreciate the other gentleman to respond here. I don't know that I can't tell you that the dollar amount of the award is where the risk factor is. Do
Agree?
you know what I'm saying? I
Yeah,
can't tell
yeah.
you that larger projects are actually riskier and would require more due diligence around return than smaller ones. We haven't done that level of analysis yet.
This is going to be a deeply unsatisfying statement, so I apologize in advance. I'm not sure what to do here. I agree that the ROI calculation should not be definitive for whether a project is funded or not, because certain projects are funding planning or ecosystems or, et cetera. And if all of these things were clean, the private sector would be funding them. So this is an area I think where the state has to step into, close what I'll call marketplace gaps. At the same time, to say we're not going to do an ROI calculation seems grossly irresponsible to me. So I'm not sure how you discern what projects may or may not require it. Off the top of my head, planning, maybe not. Those tend to be smaller and et cetera. But I think I'd have to think some more about which projects, where it becomes a greater factor that needs to be considered. Certainly dollar size is one of them, but like you, I don't know that that's the right criteria, because type also has to play into it and where it's being done. $1 million in Buchanan County is a lot different than $1 million in Fairfax County.
Very fair.
So,
$100,000 is not going to get you anything in Fairfax County. I mean,
Yeah.
it won't even get you coffee for a month,
so, we're setting out the criteria for calculating it. What is there the opportunity for an applicant to kind of supplant and add like unforeseen elements that
Yes.
make up for some others, right? So this is the criteria, but is there X credit, right? That they're doing something different that adds a different element to the return than that is what is existing criteria.
Yes, that's a great question, John, and that does happen often. So again, our tool is very simple. It's a very crude instrument. However, there are many applicants that will come with their own economic impact evaluation, for example. And so it does allow them, John, to speak about extension, like, well, this project only is going to deliver X number of jobs. This is kind of the larger impact or effect of these activities. And this is part of a longer term strategy, for example, and this is an essential building block. So that's where the narrative and the whole design of the project, I think, comes into focus and becomes a much more important part of the evaluation process than this ROI template, which is, I would consider, a very small supplement to a much larger application.
Yeah, if my memory corrects me, I don't know when it was, there was a project that we approved, that during the presentation, someone added some additional content, and that was kind of a swaying,
Yeah,
in approving it. So again, it does happen. Again, it's just, we need to allow for that to happen.
yeah.
That's my other.
Well, maybe the next time we get together, we'd love to demonstrate a tool that James has built for us, which is really a break-even analysis tool, which uses the same inputs, but is a bit more nuanced and it's very elegantly done. And so we can just juxtapose these two tools. Maybe that's the question, is it the tool? But I think what I'm hearing generally is the members feel it's important to include some type of ROI. The question J. Lark's asking, is a dollar value the right thing? We don't have enough information to know, but we'll continue to explore that topic. And then
Sure.
Doing kind of it's almost like an economic impact study. Like, what are the other benefits that aren't kind of calculated in here? So what do the jobs do? And does it take into consideration those revenues that are going to be spent in that jurisdiction? And, anyways, is it the collateral benefits that are taken into consideration too? It's the overall impact statement.
Yes. We are not using a full economic impact model, John. I've done that before, and we do have access to some tools that would allow us to expand on what's typically provided for us. That does tell a much richer story, not just the primary jobs created, but secondary jobs and other spending effects as you've described. So that's another alternative, as well as to, think about using some more sophisticated tools.
I have to go in 2 minutes. So I don't know.
2 minutes. I
Yeah.
think we're at the end of our meeting.
Okay.
So you want to wrap us up here?
Absolutely. Well, thanks to everybody for that great discussion there. Our next meeting will be March 24th. It's in person. It's the same day as the big board meeting. We'll be meeting a little bit earlier, 11 a.m. till noon. And I think that's it. Really appreciate everybody for attending this meeting. We're going to see you on the 24th, and without objection, we're going to call this adjourned.
Thank
Meeting
you.
of this committee.
Great
is
job.
adjourned.
Great
Thank
job.
you
Sarah.
very much.
Fantastic discussion.
Take care. Drive safely.